Anytime, right? So, hey, have you ever been in a situation in your life where you're with someone and they're afraid and you're not, and so all you can do is laugh at them? You know what I'm saying? And so recently, I found myself here. My wife and I were taking senior pictures for a friend. And what's going on? There's some important details to know. So we're in a side-by-side going to this really cool location to shoot, right? And so I'm in the back. It's me, my wife, our friend, the friend's mom, okay? Remember that. Me, wife, friend's mom, right? And we have a Bible with us to take some pictures, right? So friend's mom has a Bible. That's very important. Okay, so what's going on? So we're in this side-by-side, and we're going to this location, and it's really, really muddy. All right, so for me, my wife, and our friend, that was no problem. Like, whatever, we're going to slide, we're going to kind of do whatever. It's fine, it's normal, right? But for friend's mom, not so normal. And so we're driving, and we start to slide a little bit, and she, like, screams and, like, grabs the little handrail thing, you know? And she's like, and, like, freaking out a little bit that we're sliding. And it's really funny. And, like, I found myself laughing. I know, judge me, but I am. I'm laughing at her. And I look up in a moment, and she has the Bible. Well, let me just show you. You guys can put the picture up. I see this. Now, I don't know about you, but if that side-by-side were to flip, I mean, I know it's a Bible and all, but I don't know if it's going to do much help, right? And so I look up, and I'm like, we got to take this picture. And so I think a lot of us, we find ourselves in that situation. Now, not like side-by-side, Bible over our face situation, but stuck in the mud of life. You know what I'm talking about? The mud of life, that situation that you've been praying to see God move in, and you've been praying to see God do something significant in you, and you feel like you're just spinning. That situation where you're like, okay, God, I've done everything I know how to do, but I'm stuck. And that situation where you have no control over. That situation, that's the mud of life. And you know, this guy from this text, this is kind of where we find him. We find him stuck in the mud. Find him stuck in the mud. You see, he was born blind. So all of his life he could not see, right? His life's not going the way he wanted it to go. And to be honest with you, he was born into the mud. It wasn't even a choice. It just happened to him. And you know, I think the worst thing that we can do when we find ourselves stuck in the mud is settle in and just live there. That's the worst thing we can do, is just be like, well, I'm just going to live here. Just kind of my life. But this is where this man finds himself. He finds himself living in the mud. Well, I'm blind, can't do anything about it, so I'm just going to live there. And maybe for you, you're not blind, but you're like, all right, I'm living paycheck to paycheck because that's how it's always been, so this is just my mud. Just going to live here. Or maybe for you, it's like, all right, maybe you're not living paycheck to paycheck, but you're really believing to see something. You're really believing God to do something, but deep down you're like, maybe this is just my mud. Maybe this is just where I'm called to be, just to kind of like get by and barely exist, and maybe this is just who I'm supposed to be. And can I tell you, there is another option besides living in the mud, that you don't have to live in the mud. And this morning, I want to give you 3 things that answer this question. What do you do when you're stuck in the mud? What do you do when you're stuck in the mud? I want to give you 3 things that answer this question, and it's a different option than choosing to live in the mud. All right, so Jesus and his disciples, which is a fancy word for friends, they're walking around, right, and they're doing their thing. They're on their ministry tour, healing people. It's amazing, right? And all of a sudden, Jesus looks over, and he sees a man who is blind, born blind, and his disciples ask him, hey, Jesus, why did this happen? And Jesus is walking over to the man while he's saying, he's like, it didn't happen. It happened so that God's power could be seen through him. And then Jesus goes on talking to his disciples, but he's standing here with this man. And, you know, this is the first thing that I see, that when you're stuck in the mud, because this guy was stuck in the mud, you have to get something. You got to know something. And the first thing is you got to know that you're on the mind of Christ. You got to know that you're on the mind of Christ. You see, I love this story because Jesus, it wasn't like Jesus was walking and this man was like, Jesus, please help me. It wasn't like he was sitting there begging Jesus to do something. It wasn't like he was sitting there asking, hey, could you please, if you have a slight problem, can you help me? That wasn't happening. Jesus just saw him and cared. And can I tell you that Jesus sees you and he cares? He sees you where you're at. He knows that you're stuck in the mud. He sees you and he cares. He's thinking about you, that you are on the mind of Christ, that God is thinking about you. And I think a lot of us fall into this trap, that we hear Jesus is thinking about us and we think this, I'm in trouble. Like, I know what I did. God knows what I did. If he's thinking about me, that is a problem, right? Some of us fall into that trap, but here's what I want you to understand. God's not sitting up there and looking down at you and be like, well, you got yourself into that one. Have fun. Good job. You said you would never do that again. Have fun in the mud. When you get out, I'll help you. That's not what God's thinking about you. Check this out. This is Jeremiah 29:11, now the New Living Translation. It says, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you. That's what it says. For I know the thoughts. God is thinking to you. He's thinking about you. And check this out. He's not thinking bad things. He's not thinking like, way to go, you did this again. It says, hey, I know the thoughts that I think to you. These are thoughts of peace. These are thoughts not of evil. They're of hope and to give you a future. Right? God is thinking positive, good things about you. And I want you to write this down. If Jesus isn't thinking negative thoughts about you, why are you thinking negative thoughts about you? Think about that. If God's not sitting up there in heaven looking down and be like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe, Roseanne, you did that again? Like, seriously? I mean, come on. If he's not thinking that about you, why are you thinking that about you? Why are you sitting here struggling? Why are you putting yourself to sleep every single night worrying how you're going to pay the bills? God's not worried about how to pay the bills. He's not concerned. Why are you sitting here buying into the lie that you had a bad parent, so that you're going to be a bad parent and your kids are going to be bad parents? Why are you buying into that? Because the Bible says that if he called you, he will equip you, right? And so, hey, I called you to be a parent. Now I'm going to equip you to be a parent. Now I'm going to teach you how to be a parent. Regardless if you had a good one or a bad one, I'm going to use you and you're going to be a great parent. Your kids are going to grow up knowing God and loving Jesus, and they're going to be a good parent, right? But you have to buy into the lie. You can't buy into the lie that what God is saying isn't true. That if your thoughts don't line up with the thought life of heaven, you will stay stuck in the mud. If your thoughts don't line up with heaven, you will stay stuck. And so many Christians stay stuck in their life and doing the same thing over and over and over again because they're buying into the lie that, man, I don't know if God's really thinking good things about me. And so they start thinking negative things about themselves. And this is the biggest attack on the church today. It's through our thinking. It's through our thoughts, right? And you guys know what I'm talking about. And so I want to encourage you, man, hey, make sure that your thought life lines up with heaven. Ask, what is God thinking about me? Now I want to think it. Think about that. That's so easy. What does God say about me? Let me think on it. That's it. That's all it is. Read it and think about it, right? But this is what this man did. All of a sudden, his thought life changed. Something changed. And here's how I know. Because we read the Bible, and it doesn't say anything like he thought differently, but something changed. And here's how I know. Because the thoughts you think determine if you're in position to receive. The thoughts that you're thinking right now determine if you're in position to receive or not, right? And so Jesus walks over to this man, and he starts talking to him. And this guy had an option. He could think like this. All right, light of the world, whatever, bro. You do you, I'll do me, just walk away. Like, that's what he could be thinking. He could be thinking that, like, I don't know who you are. I've never really heard of you. Like, you just, okay, whatever. He could have thought that. And if he did, guess what would have happened? Absolutely nothing. He would have stayed stuck in the mud. But something changed inside of him. There was a perspective change. He's like, all right, maybe this could work. Just maybe this guy's actually telling the truth. Maybe he can actually heal me. And can I ask you, how crazy would it be if we bought into what Jesus said about us? Like, what would happen in our lives if we just said, okay, Jesus said this about me, so I'm going to believe it. That's simple, but what would change? What would the church look like? What would your life look like if Christians everywhere just said, okay, God said this about me, so I'm going to believe it and I'm going to do it? Think of how simple that is, but it could be a life-changing principle. Just to think differently, to set your mind on heaven, right? And so this is what this man does. His thought life changes. It changes, and it opens the door for Jesus to do something significant in him. And can I ask you this question? Is it this simple that getting unstuck from the mud is as easy as changing your thinking? I think it could be. I really do. Because when his thinking changed, Jesus did something else. Jesus spits on the ground. All right, so like if I'm this guy, I don't know if I have the same response that he has. All right, because here's what's going on. This guy's sitting here, can't see. Jesus never like formally introduces himself. He never comes up and he's like, excuse me, I'm the Son of God. I'm about to heal you. Just kind of chill here. He doesn't say that, right? He just comes over and he's talking to his friends. And this guy can't see, remind you, and hears someone spit, then feels something wet on his face. Yeah, put your shoes, like yourself in that guy's shoes. Like think about it. Like what would you feel like? I would be like, I don't know what happened, but I don't like it, right? That's what I would be like, right? And so he feels something wet on his face, and this guy who he has no idea who he is just does this. But like what this man understood was that when your thinking changes and you understand that you are on the mind of Christ, not just that, but you understand that you have to be united with Christ. You have to be united with Christ. That's the second thing I want you to write down is that, man, you have to know that you're on the mind of Christ, but you have to be united with Christ. You see, this guy, there was nothing that was going to turn him away from his miracle. He's like, I'm going to be united with Christ. I'm going to do whatever it takes. If that means he's got to spit on the ground and put mud on my eyes, then I'm going to do it. And can I ask you this question? If God gave you what you were believing for, but it came in a different package than you expected, would you still be okay with getting it? Think about that. If what you were believing for, if God gave it to you, but it came in a different package, would you be okay with getting it? For instance, maybe for you, your mud is to see your dad come over. Like your relationship with your dad's not the best, right? And you want your kids to meet their grandpa, and you want them to grow up and love each other and just be this happy little family. Right? Yeah, that's what you want. But like the relationship with you and your dad isn't the best, and that's your mud. You know you're stuck. You know you're supposed to do something. And you're sitting here, and you're believing for God to change your dad's heart. What if God was saying, I'm waiting for you to invite him over? What if I'm waiting on you? What if we're waiting on God and God is waiting on us? And that we're saying, okay, if this happens, it's going to happen like A plus B equals C. And God says, no, I need you to take the first step. You take the first step and I won't fail. You just do you, and I'll do me, and I'll do what I can do, right? What if it was that easy? What if getting unstuck was that easy? Just saying, I'm united with Christ. Whatever he wants me to do, even if it's uncomfortable, I'm going to do it. Even if it's not what I pictured it would look like, I'm going to do it. What if your mud is your finances? And you've been believing, okay, I'm believing for my year of financial freedom, and I believe this is going to happen. I know I'm going to get out of all this debt. And so what you do is you save some more, keep saving. Like, I'm going to do this. This is my plan. I'm going to do it. And God says, hey, my plan for you is not to save your way out, but to give your way out. To give more than you ever have given before. To say, hey, I'm gonna tithe, I'm gonna give, I'm gonna go above anything I've ever given before. What if it was that easy? What if being united with Christ was just taking a step that you're a little bit uncomfortable with, but that gets you out of the mud, get you unstuck? Think about that. And I want to encourage you that I think most Christians are stuck in the mud, not because they don't believe that Jesus can do something. Because they do. They believe, okay, I know you can move that mountain. I know you can do this. But deep down, they're not fully united with Christ. Now, I'm not talking about salvation, but I'm talking about trust. They don't fully trust Jesus. Like, there's just a little bit. Like, I'm going to give you everything but this little bit over here, just in case you don't come through. Just in case, like, the plan doesn't work out, I have my plan B over on the side, right? And I've been there. I know I've done it. And it's like, all right, God, I'll give you all of this, but I'm going to hold back just a little bit. And can I tell you, God's plan is always better than our plan. It is. God's plan is always better than our plan. I know that sounds simple, but it is life-changing when you understand that God will walk you in the steps that you're supposed to go, right? And sometimes they might seem like it's uncomfortable. It might seem like, man, where am I going? But if you stay united with Christ, you cannot fail. If you stay united, arms locked with Jesus, you cannot fail. And maybe for you, being united with Jesus and fully trusting isn't that hard when it comes to the plan because, I don't have a better plan, so I'll just do Jesus' thing. Right? But maybe for you, right, being united with Christ is more difficult when people get involved. When someone comes into your life, right? Like this guy, fast forward in the story, he gets healed, he's walking out, right? And all of a sudden, everyone who looked over him, everyone who walked by him day after day after day, everyone who ignored him finally sees him. They finally look at him, and they finally start asking, hey, how did this happen? Like Jesus, he's a sinner. How did he heal you? Like, are you serious? Like, are you sure Jesus did it? And all of a sudden, the people who overlooked him now notice him. And can I tell you that I know in my life, I have found myself in moments where I'm going to say, I'm fully trusting God. I'm taking a step. All of a sudden, someone who never notices, and I just take my commitment level and just turn down just a little bit. Just very, very little, right? And I don't know about you, but maybe you're just turning your commitment level down just a little bit, where you're saying, all right, I'm not going to pray for my lunch at work because these people, they don't believe in the Jesus thing, and I don't want to make them uncomfortable, so I'm just going to take my commitment level and just a little bit. Or, I'm going to not serve as much because my family doesn't understand that why would I serve and give up time on my day off? And so to kind of make them more comfortable, I'm just going to turn my commitment level down just a little bit. Not much. I'm just going to take 1 week off. This is my normal. I know God told me to serve this many times, but I'm just going to turn down a little bit. And can I tell you that when you do that, here's what you're doing. You're putting your trust in people over God. You're saying, I'm going to trust you to supply for me. I'm going to trust you to give me approval. I'm going to trust you to work this out. And can I tell you something really cool? God has already approved you. God already has this worked out. God already knows what's going to happen. He knows the end from the beginning. If you just trust him and rely on him and don't get caught up in your plan or other people, God's going to do something awesome through you. He will do something amazing through you. But you got to fully trust. And I want you to write this down. It is very short, but it's a big deal. Trust is not 99%. Trust is not 99%. Trust is all in. Everything. Everything you've got, that is trust. Trust is putting everything you've got into God's basket and saying, if this fails, it's on you. That's trust. Saying, God, I'm trusting you in a way where there is no plan B. I don't know what I would do if this fails. And God says, it's all right. I got it. You fully trusted me. Guess what? I'm going to take you further. I'm going to move you along. Hey, just fully trust me. Just put everything in my basket and your life will be changed. Now, I want to warn you, all right? So whenever you fully trust God, you will always have an opportunity to take your trust back. Always, right? So maybe you're in here and you're saying, I'm going to fully trust God. And God's been telling you, hey, you need to stop cussing. You need to stop this. It's not good. You need to line your thoughts up with Jesus and speak like Jesus spoke. And you're like, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And maybe this is your moment. You're like, I'm going to do this. And you go into the car and you leave. You're turn on the radio. You're like, this is amazing. I just feel great. And then you pull out of the parking lot and you don't even get out of this parking lot before someone cuts you off. And all of a sudden you have opportunity to let something slip and be like, are you serious? These people can't even direct traffic right? What is happening? And all of a sudden it just rises up in you. You will always have a moment to pull back trust. Always. What about this? Maybe your thing isn't cussing, but your thing is more believing for God to do something through you. And you're like, okay, God, I need money for this to happen. So I'm going to tithe and I'm going to give. I'm going to do it as soon as my paycheck comes back. First thing, right? And so you're like, okay, as soon as I get my paycheck, I'm going to go home. I'm going to write this out. I know this is the amount God told me to do. And it's payday. And you get it and you're so excited. Then you drive by Chick-fil-A. And you're like, tithe, Chick-fil-A, it's God's chicken. Can I just tithe to Chick-fil-A? And so we just go to Chick-fil-A and we give our tithe to Chick-fil-A and be this is chicken. It's God's. It's fine, right? But I know that sounds really simple, but here's what I want you to understand is that simple step of turning your commitment level down turns to another step, another step, another step, another step. And soon you find yourself in a place where you are stuck in the mud. And you find yourself in a place where how did I get here? It's because you took all the trust back and you put everything in your own basket. And you said, all right, I'll figure this out. I got this one, Jesus. Thank you. Thank you for your help, but I got this one. But this man from the text was different. This guy was so different. You see, he gets mud put on his face and he understands, I'm going to stay united with Christ. No matter what it means. If you want to put mud on my eyes and make me spin around 3 times, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to stay united with you. I'm going to do what you've called me to do. Right? And so he does this, and he's full in. He's united with God, and he aligns his thinking, and he knows, okay, I'm on the mind of Christ. I'm on the mind of Christ, right? And not just that, God's thinking good thoughts about me, so I'm going to be united with him. I'm going to lock arms. I'm going to do whatever Jesus tells me to do, regardless of what that looks like in my life. Not just that, this man, all of a sudden, it opens the door for Jesus to do something else. All right, so he aligns his thinking, and he gets mud put on his face, and then Jesus says something that's crazy. And if it was me in the story, it probably would have put me over the edge. He says, now I want you to go wash your face off in this certain pool of water. All right, so I want to give you this as completely free, has nothing to do with the message, but it's a nice little detail, okay? So when you read your Bible, slow down. If you read really fast just to kind of check it off the list, you miss these important details. And you miss these things, you're like, oh, I didn't even see that. And if you just, next time you read the Bible, just slow down and read it. And God's going to speak to you in a way of the same scripture that you've read 100 times. You're like, I never saw that before. I didn't know that was there, right? So Jesus is saying to this guy, go wash in this certain pool of water. Now, if we just read over that, it would mean nothing. But for me, if I was that guy, I would say something like this. Jesus, I'm blind. How am I supposed to find this water? How am I supposed to find this pool of water? Can't I just go to the house and use the hose? Seriously, how am I supposed to find this place? Not to mention that, I've got to walk through town looking like this. I've got to walk through town with mud hanging off my eyes. People are laughing at me, making fun of me because like, oh, look, he fell in a mud puddle, so they're going to think. And I'm over here trying to find water that I can't see. But not this guy. He didn't think that way. You know what he thought? I'm united with Christ, and so not just that, I'm going to have the determination of Christ. I'm going to be determined like Jesus is determined. I'm going to do what Jesus told me to do no matter what the cost. No matter what it costs me, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to see it through. And you know, this man, he just is going for it. He's like, I'll do it. I will find this water. I don't know how long it took him. I don't know if it was minutes or hours or days, but he did it. He was determined to see it through. And can I ask you this question? What if the determination of Christ is more about staying in the process than getting out of the mud? What if the determination of Christ was more about see what God can do in me in the mud than getting me out of the mud? You know, this is where this guy finds himself. I think this guy was more determined to stay in the process that Jesus put him in than he was to get out of being blind. I think he was like, I see Jesus for who he really is, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this man, make him approve of me. And Jesus is like, I already did. I already approved of you. And what that did was it made him realize, I'm going to be determined to do whatever it takes. I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. I'm going to go wherever he tells me to go. I'm going to say whatever he tells me to say. And he was more determined to stay in the process than he was just to get out of it. You know, and in Psalm 40 and verse 1, it says this in the New Living Translation. It says, I waited patiently for the Lord to help me. And he turned to me and he heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud. He lifted me out of the mud and the mire, and he set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. Can you guys put verse 1 back up? It says, I waited patiently. You know, when I read this, I'm like, all right, I get like, God's going to pick me up out of the mud, and God's going to do this. But what I was really like going over and over, why would the writer of this psalm say, I waited patiently? Like, you're in the mud. Why are you patient in the mud? And what I think God spoke to me is this, because the mud is more of a process than a moment. That the mud is more of a process than a moment. That we find ourselves in the mud and we think like, okay, like this is this big, long period of time, but really it's this process. It's this period right here where God says, hey, if you just stay in the mud, I will pick you out. I will pick you up. You don't have to climb out of the mud. You don't have to work your way out. God's like, I'll do it. I'll do it for you. Just wait patiently. Just wait in the mud. And you know, when I think about like being determined to stay in the mud, like someone who is just determined to stay in the process no matter what, I cannot help but to think about Jesus. You know, when Jesus, if you don't know the story, what's going on is Jesus is in a place with his 12 closest friends. One of his friends sells him out. So he goes and he gets a payment to say, hey, this is where Jesus is going to be. I will lead you to him so you can arrest him and kill him. All right? So Jesus knows this is happening. He knows what's going on. And Jesus goes to this place to pray in this garden. Right? And so he goes with his disciples and he goes to pray. And he is like seriously so close to being arrested. Like it's going to happen. And he knows it. He can feel it. He knows it's going to happen. He knows he's about to die a crazy death. Right? So what Jesus does is he goes in the garden and he says, hey, you guys stay there. I'm going to go over here. All right? So he leaves his disciples there and he goes over to pray. And we're going to pick up in Matthew 26 and verse 39. And it says this, he went on a little further and bowed with his face to the ground. All right, so Jesus was with his face to the ground praying. And you know, when I read this, I thought about in Luke. So in Luke, it's a different perspective of the story. Someone else is telling the same story, but from a different angle, right? And they say this, that Jesus was sweating blood. All right, so that's a human condition that when you are under extreme stress, that you sweat blood. All right, so Jesus is face down on the ground, sweating blood. And what I saw was that when his blood hit the dirt, it created mud. That it created something that when his blood hit the dirt, it created mud. There was mud on his face. And can I tell you, because Jesus was determined to stay in his process, because Jesus was determined to stay where he was planted, because Jesus was said, I'm going to see this thing through, we are now empowered to live in the mud. We are now empowered to say, I'm going to stay until God pulls me out. I'm going to stay until God gets everything in me that he wants to get in me. And he says, okay, because Jesus did it, I can do it. All right, and so here's what's going on. Jesus does this, and he stays determined. He stays determined in the process. And can I tell you, please understand, I'm not saying to choose to live in the mud, because I don't believe we're called to live in the mud, right? The mud, that if you live in the mud all your life, man, you're given a bad example of Jesus. You're given a bad example of Jesus. But I do believe this, that we are called to love the mud. We're called to love the mud. You guys can put that slide up. That we are called to love the mud. We're called to love the mind of Christ. And that we're called to love being united with Christ. And we are called to love to be determined like Christ was determined. That's our life. We are called to love those things. And you know, when we choose to love the mud, we don't choose to live there, but we choose to love it. You know what happens is we say, all right, I didn't choose this. I wouldn't even put myself there. Right? I don't want to be there. But I'm going to stay here until God gets in me what he wants to get in me. Because here's a secret. You can learn something in the mud that you can't learn from the mountaintop. You can't learn it anywhere else except in the mud. The only place you can learn it is in the mud. The only where God can teach you is in the mud. And can I ask you, what if being in the mud was more about what God wanted to put in you than actually getting out of the mud? That God's like, okay, getting out of the mud, that's easy. I can just pick you up and plant you. But here's what I want you to understand. If you stay here, I can put something in you that you have never been willing to listen to unless you were here. And God says, okay, hey, God says this, if you just listen and you just stay loving the mud, I can do something in you, then do something through you that will change everything. That will change everything, right? And so because Jesus loved his mud, we can say, all right, I trust you enough to love my mud. I trust you enough to love my process. I trust you enough to stay in my process and not try to find my way out. Just stay here until, God, you pull me out. Because you will pull me out. You are faithful. I know you will do it. But I'm going to stay planted in the process and learn what you've called me to learn. I'm going to be who you've called me to be. I will not leave this season empty-handed. Think about it. The biggest disappointment in life would be to be pulled from the mud and get nothing from it. Think about that. Leave the mud, but never learn from the mud. That'd be awful. If you leave the mud and you never get what God was trying to get you in the mud, then what was the point of the mud? What was the point of the process? And see, when you learn to love the mud, something happens in you. Something changes in you. You know, this guy from this text, he learned to love the mud. He just loved the process. He said, okay, I know if I stay in the process, God will pull me out. He will see me through. I'm just staying where I'm in the process. And he learned to love the mud, right? And so what happens is he goes back and he gets healed, right? And so he can see now. And all these people come up to him. And all these people start saying things like, hey, how did this happen? How can you see? Like this Jesus guy, he's a sinner. Like I know it wasn't him. How did he do it? What happened? And they start asking him all these questions, question after question after question, right? And then when they find this man being questioned by all these people, saying, what happened to you? How did this work out? What happened? And I love his response. Because here's the truth, that when you find yourself loving the mud, something will change inside of you, and people will notice. People will see a difference. You will go to work on Monday, and people will be like, hey, what happened? Like your situation's still not good, but now there's something different in you. Something's changed about you. Your perspective has changed. What's going on? And you know, so many times we don't know what to say. Like, how do you explain that? Like, oh, Jesus like put mud on my eyes out of spit and healed me. Like, what do you say to someone, right? But look what this guy said. This is John chapter 9, verse 25. So later on in the story, they're asking him all these questions, and he says, hey, I don't know whether Jesus is a sinner. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that I was blind, and now I see. That's all I know. All I know is that I couldn't see, I met Jesus, and now I see. That's all I know. And can I tell you that when people notice a difference because you loved the mud, all you got to say is this, hey, I don't know. All I know is that my family was falling apart. I met Jesus, and now we're better than ever, right? I don't know. I just know I was addicted, and I was on my way to jail. I met Jesus, and everything is different. I'm free, right? I don't know, but I just know that, like, man, life was going crazy, that I was falling apart, that I had no idea which way to go. I met Jesus, and everything changed because Jesus changes everything. Like, that's what we need to know, is that when you stay planted in the process and you stay in the mud, God's going to take you out of the mud, and you're going to be able to say, look what Jesus did. Look what he did. All I know was I couldn't see. I met Jesus, and now I can. And it all starts in the mud. Can I tell you, your miracle starts in the mud. That the moment that God has for you, the moment that you've been believing for, this moment that you're like, okay, I want to see Jesus do something for me, it starts in the mud. It starts in the process. It starts with your thinking. It starts with you changing your thinking and aligning yourself with Jesus. Say, I'm going to think like he thinks. I'm going to be united with Jesus. I'm going to do what he does. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to stay locked with Jesus, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with him. Where he goes, I go. Where he says, I say. What he says, I say. Right? And not just that, but I'm going to be determined to see it through. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to quit in the process because it becomes uncomfortable. Because it's like, I don't want to go there. No, I'm going to stay determined because Jesus called me there. I'm going to do it. I'm going to see it through. And when you do that, man, God can do something through you. He can change your schools. He can change your family. He can change your workplace. Man, your life would never be the same if you said, I'm just going to love the mud. I'm just going to stay connected to Jesus and love the mud. Can I pray for you guys? God, I thank you so much just for who you are. Lord, I thank you that you have spoken this morning. God, I pray that this is not just something that we hear, but because it becomes something that we do. With everyone's eyes closed, I want to ask you this question. Maybe you say, all right, Devin, I know this was for me. I know this message was for me. I know that I've been in a place where I've just been stuck in the mud. I've been spinning. I've been in a place where I know that I'm here, and I've learned to hate the mud. But this morning, I know God's telling me, just stay in the process. Just stay in the process, and I will pull you out. You don't have to work to get out. I will pull you out. You just align your thinking, you align your actions, and you align your determination, and I will pull you out. If that's you, you know God is just speaking to you. I want to pray for you right where you're at. If that's you, can you just stand up? I just want to pray for you. Don't miss your moment. Yeah, thank you. I really do believe God wants to change your perspective. And he wants to show you, hey, you might not have chose to live here, and you're not going to live here. But listen, if you just learn to love it for the moment, God will use it. He will turn it around for his glory and for your good. He will use the mud in a way where you're like, listen, I didn't choose the mud, but God used the mud. He used where I was. God, I thank you so much just for who you are. God, I thank you for all those people who stood, God. And I just speak into their life peace, first of all. God, I pray that in their situation, God, they see you, that they say, okay, I'm going to stay planted in the process. I'm going to let God use me. I'm going to let God move me. I'm going to let God teach me something in the mud. Lord, I pray that you give us the faith to receive what you're trying to give to us, that we don't close it off because it looks different than what we thought it would look like. And God, I pray that we get to look at ourselves and say, okay, I'm not living here, but I'm going to love it for the moment that I'm here. And God, I pray that we're going to hear stories because people decided, I'm going to get what God called me to get. And God, we're going to see people come out of the mud, that we're going to see people go to a brand new level. We're going to see families change and workplaces change because we said, hey, I'm going to love the process. I'm going to let God use me in the process and then pull me out to something bigger. Can we all stand? I want to pray for all of us.